Did you know that the Bible reveals that Jesus Christ was present in the Garden of Eden?
No.
After Adam and Eve fell into sin, they hid among the trees for fear of God's presence. It is important to understand why they felt that fear.
Okay.
The text in the book of Genesis 3 verse 8 reveals that they heard the voice of Jehovah God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. Now the intriguing question is, how can a voice walk? This is where the plot becomes fascinating. Watch what the book of John tells us in chapter 1 verse 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. If we read in verse 14, we discover that the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. John 1 verse 14. John is conveying to us that Christ existed long before the creation of the world. He simply decided to incarnate himself in human form on earth. So if the Word became flesh, it was Jesus Christ who walked in the Garden of Eden. If you want to learn more about the Bible, right, I want to. And follow me for more.
I won't. What in the 3 levels of hell of inaccurate historical bullshit was that? Oh my goodness. As this guy that I like to listen to said, oh my Jesus on a motorbike. Oh my goodness. This is some bullshit. Okay, first thing. It became a very apparent thing for Christians in the 3rd and 4th and 5th and 6th century, especially during that time frame, to force Jesus into the narrative of the Old Testament. So there were many doctrines that was created in order to force Jesus to be a part of the Old Testament. Now, this instance is the first time I've heard this bullshit. I've heard other things by making it people saying that Jesus and Melchizedek was the same person, when clearly Melchizedek was the son of the king of Sodom, who was just killed by Abraham, and then Melchizedek became the new king of Sodom. But people have tried to rewrite and renegotiate that story. In this instance, this creator is renegotiating the fact of Jesus being described of as the Word in John 1 and walking and becoming flesh, and making that be the God that strolled in the garden when Adam and Eve sinned. There's a few problems with that. The first problem is that when you look at John 1:1 in the Greek, the Koine Greek to which it was written, it actually will say, in the beginning was the Word, and that the Word was with the God, and the Word was a God, and that God was towards the God, right? So it is not making them one in the same, but it was calling the Word a God. So the Word that became flesh later on is not God, but a God. And this further demonstrates how these people stole the history of the Sumerians and understood that they stole the history of the Sumerians. Because according to the Sumerian story of when Adapa and Titi were placed in the Garden of Eden in Chaldea, once they were able to reproduce, to which they weren't supposed to be able to reproduce, the god Enlil, who was the Satan, the administrator over the earth, because Satan in Sumerian means administrator, when he was the administrator over the earth, because he was the son of the primary god, Anu. Anu was his daddy, the primary god. Anu means sky. He's the sky god. He's the heavens. And Anu's son, Enlil, was the Satan over earth, the administrator over earth. He was the god of earth. And he walked through the garden in the cool of the day. Now, understand this as another historical perspective. The writers of the Old Testament, for the most part, until you start getting to Hezekiah and Josiah and Ezra, which brings you into around 700 BCE to about 500 BCE, but prior to that, the belief was that the deities were anthropomorphized. Everybody's God had a body. Everybody's God ate. Everybody's God rested. Remember, Abraham washed the feet and told it of the God, and told him to rest, and fed God and fed his angels. Jacob wrestled with God. God walked past Moses. Angels show up in human form. They were accustomed to their gods being as human as possible with divinity. Look at in Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers, it multiple times it talks about how God was either seen face to face by Moses or by the 70 elders, or the fact that they fed God, that they made offerings to God of meat and drink. So because they believed their gods had bodies. And now you're trying to shoehorn Jesus into the writers of the Old Testament. Is laughable. It further shows how desperate Christians are to make this book fit and work. And then when you do shoehorn Jesus into that, all you're really saying to me and other deconstructionists is that Jesus is responsible for the genocide of the people of Jericho, responsible for the genocide of the people of Moab and the Moabites and the Amorites and the Perizzites and the Jebusites. That Jesus is responsible for the 3,000 people that Moses was commanded to kill, the 3,000 Israelites that he was commanded to kill. That Jesus was responsible for giving a potion to cause a woman to have a miscarriage if she cheated on her husband and killing the embryo, the baby inside. Jesus is responsible for all of that and many other cruelties throughout your Old Testament. And you still believe in him? You still think he's your savior? Sounds like you got a split personality. Y'all have a great day. And remember always, you got to free yourself to be yourself because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibrations.